So tell us a little bit about The Crate, because it is a video extension of the column that you do in the EG.
Yep.
What's the history of that?
Of the column?
You're a bit of a long, a #1 ticket holder there now, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. Somehow it's lasted nearly, I think it's 6 years now. So I'm not quite sure how I'm getting away with that, but I am. But look, the idea, I've always sort of wanted to do a column like that in the paper, which is just picking something from the archives, from my collection, and just sort of basically saying why I like it. It's that simple.
It's almost kind of pure music criticism in a way, and there's not much of that anymore that isn't to do with a release schedule or, you know, somebody being in the country. Yeah,
and I think maybe it's a kind of a reaction to that, because I sort of wrote about music as a freelancer and what have you for so long, and you're always so tied to those release schedules, and you're tied to what the industry sort of dictates. And it's so liberating to be freed from that and just to be able to say whatever you like about whatever music you want.
Do you ever talk about like your personal music fantasies, like who you would be if you could be a record?
I don't think I ever have. I've talked about some elements of fantasy in it, but not strictly like that. No, that's a good idea though.
Well, it struck me that a lot of music critics seem to not be really raging fans, and I definitely am a raging fan. Like, I was watching some old Cher, and I was thinking, man, I want to be Cher, like actually be her.
Well, I think there's a sense that to be a fan means that your critical judgment is somehow clouded, which is a shame, because I think a lot of the time fandom can create some really interesting writing.
Yeah, I think that's probably where I'm coming from. I think it's probably a result of sort of being a sort of a music critic, as you would expect, for quite a long time, and then sort of popping out the other side and just sort of rejecting all that and kind of like just wanting to do it another way.
Well, do you like fanzines?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love fanzines.
Because like what you're doing is like a mature, credible, sanctioned fanzine.
Yeah, no, well...
Aren't you pleased to hear those terms?
Yeah. Mature and sanctioned.
Mature.
Totally mature.
But I love, the fanzine now is kind of the blog pretty much, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I love all that.
Chris, I've mentioned on the show before that I really enjoy the way that both in the column and on the segments on the show, it can go from, you know, being really into sort of the cult of the singer-songwriter with, you know, a John Lennon type, and then switch over to Barry White or, you know, early primitive house records, and there's always a sense that you're really engaging with the particular or the particularity of the individual piece of music that you're talking about. And I wanted to ask if you feel like there's some kind of underlying logic or pattern to your tastes, or do you find that there's no particular pattern at all? Do you see there being some overall sort of story being told, or is it a lot of different little stories?
I think inevitably there has to be sort of little bits of stories, but over that is just the one thing that I go for all the time, which is feel. And whether it be a folk record or a disco record, there's feel within it. It's a different feel, but what I'm looking for is the true feel of a folk record or a disco record or a house record, techno record, rock and roll record, metal record, whatever. You can sort of pick it when it's there just as easily as you can pick it when it's not there.
Is it important to you to sort of judge a record on its own terms, or is that something that you think in those terms or not in those terms?
No, it's just purely on my own terms.
Your terms?
Yeah, whether I feel it or not. And if I feel it, then I want to find out why. And, you know, part of the whole thing about The Crate is sort of memories and associations, and kind of figuring out what that feel, why I felt something about a record in the past, whether it be last week or 20 years ago, which is kind of fun because it goes in really deep, and you can and you sort of it's kind of fun to pluck it out.
Do you think that taste is programmed, like you get set into certain cognitive musical responses at a very early age? I have a theory that you do.
Yeah, you know what? I don't think so. I'm not sure. I mean, I often think about the first sort of musics that I heard, and They've sort of stayed with me. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was pretty bad music that my parents had.
What was that?
Oh, like the Stylistics and like Barbara Streisand and stuff like that. Yeah,
Bert
Four
Kaempfer?
Tops. No,
Not that bad?
no, not like that.
Thanks, Dad.
all that stuff's kind of stayed with me, but I couldn't say that I was born with it.
We
It was
decided,
learned, I think.
Yeah.
we decided to test ourselves a little bit today by just throwing the idea of greatest evers out there, or I suppose favourite ever in this instance. Could you narrow it down to one or two, or do you have a kind of rotating door policy of whatever you remember at the time?
They're
That
pretty...
sounds very brothel of
Well, we're
No,
music critics.
They pretty much are what they are, my favourite records. But, I mean, I kind of like songs and moments in songs and tracks better than albums, which is because a lot of my learning was done in club culture, which is not about albums or anything like that. It's about particular moments and stuff. But yeah, I have my favourite albums for sure, and they pretty much stay the same. I don't think there's been a new one for a wee while. Like Tricky, would be one of the last ones. Maybe Flaming Lips, something like that.
So number one all time, gun to your head.
Remain in Light, Talking Heads.
Oh, really?
Very nice.
Very nice choice.
I think. What else? Tricky, Goldie, maybe some Sly and the Family Stone, kind of things like that. Otis Redding records, things
Excellent.
like that. The ones you always play, Can, Flying Nun stuff. The ones you always pick out.
Always.